Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is David. How do you say your last name, David?
Suich.
Suich. Okay, that sounds easy enough. Okay. Now you're an NDE investigator.
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me on the show. I really appreciate it. It's a good opportunity to get the word out there that there is no such thing as death. So I came down with some chronic pain about 21 years ago, tendonitis, and it went all throughout my body. And at first, it made it very difficult to use my hands. And then I couldn't walk. I was in mobility scooter for 3 years. And after 20 years, my body is finally healing. But it really knocked my life into a downward spiral. And I was out of work for a while. I was laying in bed. I couldn't do much. I couldn't sit down too long. I couldn't stand up too long because then the pain I'd have to keep switching. And so I was watching YouTube videos, and I clicked on a YouTube video about an atheist who died, saw the afterlife, and returned. And he had this pretty wild, amazing story. And I have a pretty good feel. I've been in the world of sales. I was in there for 23 years and worked with businessmen on a regular basis, vice presidents and presidents of companies. And you got pretty good at spotting a liar. And these guys that would talk about their experiences didn't have any of the signs of a person who lies. Matter of fact, they seemed very sincere. And so it got me very curious. And I thought, well, I'm going to look into this. And one thing led to another. And before you know it, I had around 700 near-death experience testimonies that I had heard. And some interviewed face-to-face, some by phone, some by video testimonies, others books, recordings, things like that. And I thought, this message that they're bringing us, which is a beautiful message of love and acceptance for all, and an eternal life, and all these things that were just amazing. I thought the world needs to know about it. So I published a book called God Took My Clothes. And the title comes from the first YouTube video I clicked on. The guy ended up in a very negative, hellish experience, and he was naked. So he called out to Jesus for help, and Jesus came and got him. But he didn't have any clothes on the whole time during his experience. So,
Is this Howard Storm you're talking about?
This is Howard Storm. Yes, Howard Storm's the first one I ever heard, and we've corresponded, and he's a real good guy. Anyway, so that book is available to anybody who's interested. It's on all the major bookstores in paperback and e-format. And if you want the book and you really can't spend the money, some people are out of work because of everything that's going on in the economy right now, you can go to my website, godtookmyclothes.com, and just send me an email and ask me for a free e-copy of it. And I'll send you a free e-copy in Adobe Acrobat. It's a PDF document. And if you speak Spanish, and I didn't know this till I published the book, but a book in a different language is considered a different book. So I'm not allowed to give the published version of the book away. I can give my own e-copy away, which is before the publishing and editing and so forth. It's pretty similar. But the Spanish version, the complete version, is on my website. So if you speak Spanish, you can download the complete version. It's right there on the website. There's also a preview, first couple of chapters of the book in English.
Have you met Howard?
I have never met Howard. We've corresponded, but I never met him face to face. So I believe he's a pastor at a Methodist church.
He's since retired from there.
Your way, right? Out
yes.
Back east, somewhere in Ohio?
Uh-huh. Yeah, Cincinnati.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I think
have you ever had him on the show?
No, I haven't, but I have had my husband and I and another lady had dinner with him one night, and then we attended his church the next morning, and then we had lunch with him and his wife. And we just enjoyed him so much. It was just called him and asked him, hey, because this lady was in my IANS group, and she wanted to have her baptism rededicated, and he was doing that for her. Mm-hmm. And so she didn't have any family. So I thought, well, travel up there. So she'd have family. And then I thought, well, going to Howard's church for this, I wonder if he would meet with us. He said, well, sure. So he's just so cool. And I have referred other people to him for various reasons, and everybody's come back. Oh yeah, he talked to me right away, and is just so giving of himself to people. And in fact, go ahead.
And his book, My Descent into Death, is one of my favorites. I've probably read 30 or 40 near-death experience books, and that's definitely in the top 3.
And in fact, there was something strange going with my mother one time. It was like she was possessed. and she was in the hospital, and we thought
Oh,
she was
wow.
dying. And someone on Facebook said, contact Howard. And that's the first I've ever talked to him, because I'd never talked to him before. I didn't have him on my Facebook or anything. And he called me and he talked to me and he told me what I needed to do. And, we got a prayer chain going and stuff. But it was just, so nice to take his time. He was getting ready to do an interview and he was squeezing me in to talk to me, before that. He's just amazing. So I'm a
Yeah,
Howard
real
fan.
good man. And of course, his near-death experience completely changed his life. And that's one of the beautiful things about these experiences. Everybody who has them, they come back profoundly changed. And not only does it change their lives, but people like me who do nothing more than investigate these experiences, their lives are changed. I am completely different than the way I was. The way I look at politics, nature, religion, the way I deal with my family and friends has completely changed because of these experiences. One of the things, for instance, that you hear over and over again on the other side of the veil from these people is that we're all connected. There's a very special energetic connection. I think in the New Age spirituality community, they might call it the crystalline grid, which is kind of an odd name because it's not crystalline and it's not a grid, but it's a metaphor for what it is. It's a connection of all human beings. So when you help one human being or bring joy to just one soul, millions receive the vibration. And if you harm another, you're really harming yourself as well. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. But yeah, it does change lives. It's a beautiful thing that these people come back, and people like you who have been brave and shared your experiences, even though there's going to be a lot of people critical.
Now, when you were investigating these, what were you looking for specifically, or what did you find that you maybe wasn't looking for?
Well, before I was a Christian, and I think the Christian religion is a really beautiful religion. I mean, if I had to, I don't consider myself a religious person anymore. I'm spiritual. But if I had to choose a religion, it would probably be Christianity or Buddhism. But there were some things that didn't quite make sense to me. I mean, they had some doctrines and things that didn't seem to make sense. And when I started hearing these near-death experiences, I went, oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense now. And I guess I was just looking for the truth. Who am I? What happens to us when we die? What's the afterlife like? And I got a lot of shocks, things that, I wasn't expecting to find out. One of them is that most people believe that there's an afterlife, but a much smaller percentage of people believe that there was a pre-life. Well, one of the things I learned from near-death experiencers is that we are part of God, and therefore we are eternal as God. We've always existed. We've always have existed. We always will exist. There's no time on the other side of the veil. One of the other things I learned was the nature of our multidimensional existence. So we are multidimensional beings, and we live multiple lifetimes. And we don't just have one lifetime. Just as a human being enjoys the experience of a different reality by watching a really good movie or reading a good book, you get really into it. You feel like you're in this different reality. Souls enjoy incarnating into physical existences to experience a different life, to learn certain lessons and to experience things and to grow and to make connections. And the physical life apparently is like the fast track, the hardcore training for spirits. So to those on the other side of the veil, we're considered the courageous ones. We're up there in paradise. We're up there in this place where there is a love that's beyond description. The near-death experiencers, they talk about a love that's so strong it can't be described in words. They say things like, imagine the strongest love you've ever felt in your life and multiply it by about 500 or 1,000, and that's how it feels. I remember one man said, imagine the 100 happiest moments of your life and put them all into one moment. You still don't come close. There's just this feeling of perfect love that you cannot experience here. And when these guys get to this part, they get very frustrated because, it's the everything to experience that perfect unconditional love of the Creator. And they get to it and they can't describe it. They can't explain it to us. I mean, how do you explain a rainbow to a person who's been blind since birth? How do you explain a symphony to a person who's been deaf since birth? It's out of their paradigm of what they know. And it's the same for us. It's out of the paradigm of what we know from our earthly perspectives. But we remember it when we get there because we were there before. But part of the experience down here is amnesia. So we decide, think about what we do as a soul. We're in this perfect environment. where we have perfect love, perfect peace, perfect safety, just everything. And we separate from God. We have the illusion of separateness. And we come down to this place where we no longer feel the love. And it's scary, and there's fear, and there's danger, and we have these fragile bodies that can be damaged and harmed. And we forget that we're God. We forget that we're part of God. Some of us forget that we have an eternal, life. Some are, atheists think that we extinguish. I mean, that's terrifying. And we choose to do that. That's how beneficial the learning experience of a physical incarnation is, that we give up all that. So to those on the other side of the veil, we're considered the courageous ones. We're like the daredevil souls who do crazy things and go places that angels wouldn't dare to contemplate to go. So it's quite a revelation to realize what we're doing here and what our job is.
I mean, I had my, two NDEs, and I didn't experience what a lot of people talk about, the love, the joy. They see these beautiful things and these people, because my drowning at 5 years old was just an out of body. I was this ghost kid out running around doing stuff outside my body. And then the 25-year-old NDE, shot through a rocket, through space. It felt like that and sounded like that, like a shot through space. And then, this white, in the outline, the panel of people, all that happened, all those, but I never had like what they saw as far as, they see the pastures, they see people. But I was sick in January and I passed out, which I pass out a lot. I just wake up, nothing. You don't dream, nothing. You just passed out because I have irritable bowel. So it's nothing for me to pass out with sick. But I passed out, hit the floor. Suddenly I was out of my body, but I was like between my body and the wall. And I could hear people having a party. I could hear, and what I heard, my imagination put a picture to. So I have a picture of this sea of people. You know how when we have a party, we keep our distance, even before social distancing. They were all so close together and just yap, 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 yap. Oh, this sounds so much fun. And I'm like, what are you saying? What are you saying? That little OBE made me homesick.
Wow.
Not my other NDEs. I didn't have that homesickness, other than, I lost my twins and I've had miscarriages and I know they're there. But that is like, I wanted to go there. I wanted to hear what they were saying. And since then I've been like, imagine the conversations they have. Say you and I aren't here right now. Say we're there. Imagine what we're going to be talking about. Did you see the Milky Way, or did you see Venus, or did you watch this? Watch me. I'm going to be right here in heaven. Then I'm going to dip down and I'm going to be at Disney World, or whatever. Did you know you could do this? I mean, it's all that chatter and the excitement and the happiness. It's just like piqued my curiosity in a whole new way.
And then, that what you said there about your miscarriages, that brings something to memory. I remember one testimony. This woman died and she got to heaven, and this little girl walked up and said, "Hi, mommy." And the woman said, "Honey, I'm sorry, sweetie. I don't have any children. You're mistaken. I'm not your mommy." And the little girl says, "Yes, you are. I'm the child you aborted." And of course, this woman started to cry because when she was very young, I think 16 or 17, she had an abortion and felt guilty about, killing her own unborn child. And here her child was alive and well in the afterlife. And the little girl said, "Well, don't cry, mommy. It's okay. I really like it up here and I forgave you." And it is quite common for women to meet children they didn't know they had that were a result of an abortion or a miscarriage. So you may be meeting your kids in heaven.
A lot of people
get to meet here. Yeah. So
but see, then we run into dangers, like with what you're saying. That's great, right? But then there's people because I know people that have I feel used NDEs to promote abortion. They say, well, there's such thing as pre-birth plan. The babies decide before they're born with their guides that they want to be aborted, reincarnated later. And so you should not be against abortion. I just had somebody screaming at me here recently. She wanted to come on and talk about her NDE. Okay. But she wanted to call and talk to me first. Okay. And she was like because I'm so pro-life, and she wanted to dig at that first. Like, why? Won't you just come out and want to tell your NDE? We don't have to agree on this, but it was important to her. And so her thing was, if you believe in the afterlife, we don't die, so abortion is not wrong. Like, murder's still murder.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I'm with you. I tend to be pro-life. It's interesting though. I've heard about other cultures. One of the things that's pretty common with near-death experiences is your experience, like when you were 5, is probably the most common. Just coming out of your body, people might see a surgery happening that they're having surgery, or there was an accident and they see the self from above, and they're out of their body for a bit, and then they go back. That's the most common. Others have very extensive visits in heaven, and when they get there, it's kind of interesting from an earthly perspective. You get there and everything's completely different. So just your vision, you have no blind spots back here.
Right. 360.
Your hearing is amazing. And then a lot of times before they send you back, they allow you to ask questions. And some people, for instance, Howard said he asked several thousand questions. And one of the common questions that people ask is, are we alone in the universe? And the answer is always the same. They say, no, the universe is full of life, and there are other dimensions with other universes that are also full of life. So what I have heard is that other planets where the humans there are far more developed, most of the life in this galaxy is humanoid. So there's communities on Earth where, this is an Asian community and this is a Mexican community and so forth. There's communities. So this galaxy is mostly humanoid. But the ones who have developed, and we're kind of the new kids on the block, we think we're, high tech and all that. No, we're like at the bottom of the totem pole. They developed the technology to know when the soul goes into the fetus. And so if they want to abort before that happens, they have that choice. They generally don't do things like that, but they have the choice. But once the soul is there, they will not do an abortion, and they can detect that. So I think technology hopefully will eventually solve the issue of, pro-life versus
You
pro-choice.
mean people on other planets don't abort? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the intelligent beings on other planets. For instance, Pleiadians, they were the ones who seeded life on this planet. They have the technology to detect when a fetus receives the spirit. So I think it's probably generally a bad idea to take away this opportunity to have these physical existences. They're very important. I personally suspect, now I have never heard this directly from a near-death experiencer, but from everything I've learned, these physical incarnations that we have that can be very difficult and traumatizing for some of us are the engine of growth of God. It's the way God grows. It's the way the fractal of God grows.
And I can't think of a bad experience that I've had that I didn't eventually grow from, that I wouldn't have known that what it was like to have compassion for somebody else if I hadn't been through it myself. Like I used to be a children's services investigator. I had no idea what it felt. And I was a foster parent. I had no idea what it was like to have your child taken away from you. I couldn't understand that because I was an investigator. I was a caseworker. I was a foster parent. I had a different role with children. And then we moved to Michigan because I was going to start law school. And one of the oldest children had been in contact with the biological mother who told her to lie about us. And I got that knock on my door. And you talk about looking in the mirror. And it's like, this is what I made people feel like. This is how scared I made people. If I hadn't went through all that, I couldn't have. Just this past week, I was in the hospital with my sister, and the hospital was determined that my disabled sister was abused by the nursing home. She went to a catatonic state in the hospital. And I said, do you understand how bad it hurts to have an allegation of abuse against you? Think about it, because they were like adamant. They were coming at me 2 or 3 times a day. We think she's abused every day. And I kept saying, stop, stop. My sister didn't say it. There's no evidence. They're praying for her. If it wasn't for them, she wouldn't have been admitted because the emergency room wasn't going to admit her. And they found a doctor that would admit her. and they saved her life, but if I hadn't went through that, maybe I've been the type person, because I told him, I said, who has the best chance of, who's going to benefit if she was abused by a nursing home? Because I'm her guardian. Money, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I said, I'm telling you, it never happened.
Mm.
And so it's just like what you're saying, we cannot understand, say a loss of a child, a miscarriage, or a hurt in a car accident, in a wheelchair. We can't understand. We can't give compassion for that person in that wheelchair if we'd never had our legs broken, been in a wheelchair ourselves.
And I think that's one of the things we learn here in physical life. So if you want to truly appreciate something, you have to appreciate the opposite, right? So I went once 2 days without eating. And I remember at that time in my life, I was a teenager, I hated wheat bread. I wouldn't touch it. And when I got back to my apartment, I won't get into the reason why I went 2 days without eating, but I finally made it back to my apartment, made it back home, and there was nobody home. And all I saw in the fridge that I could eat immediately was wheat bread. And I ate a piece of wheat bread with a little bit of butter on it. And that was the best meal I ever had. And the reason is I experienced the lack of it. So, you really want to appreciate the love, the infinite love and connection that we have. And you want to grow that, you've got to experience disconnection and a lack of that love, right?
Yeah.
And the life review kind of touches on this subject you've just mentioned. So some near-death experiences are put through a life review. They take you through your entire life from the beginning to end. Some are only shown important highlights. Others are shown every single detail, everything they ever said, thought, did, and felt, with a difference. Okay. So in this life, you're one person living your life from the perspective of one human being. When you have your life review, you are yourself and you are simultaneously experiencing it from the people around you as if you were those people. So for instance, one guy, he was kind of a bully. And I guess a pedestrian walked in front of his truck as he was driving, and pedestrian didn't have the right of way, walked against the light or something. This guy gets real mad at him and he gets out of his truck, starts yelling. They get into a yelling match, and this guy, being a big, tough guy, beats this pedestrian up, hits him 34 times, breaks his nose, breaks his teeth, leaves him unconscious there in the street, and takes off. On his life review, there he was, raining down blows on this guy. And at the same time, he was that guy. He felt his nose break. He felt his teeth break. He felt the pain. He felt the embarrassment of being beat up. So for good or bad, we are shown how our behavior affects the people around us, and it can be pretty horrific. Howard Storm, for instance, was a kind of a tyrant. He was always, yelling at people, and he had a rough time in parts of his life review. I mean, the angels had to stop his life review and shine feelings of love and acceptance on him because he was having a real rough time. And then other people, one guy was a hospice worker. And he didn't think much of it. He's helping these elderly people at the end of their lives. Well, he gets into his life review and finds out that some of these people never had visitors, and that he was really the only worker who kind of talked to him and, seemed to care about him. And he said that part of his life review was like emotional fireworks. I recall one lady, she said, this was in the time before cell phones. It was back east somewhere. And she was on her way to work, and she stopped to give a stranded motorist a jump start. And it was cold outside and snowing, and she stopped and gave her a jump start and then hurried off to work. And she thought nothing of it. She had forgotten all about it. In her life review, she experienced it from the perspective of the woman who was stranded, who was getting cold. I mean, people back then would die sometimes if they were left out in the cold. If their car broke down and nobody stopped, people died. I remember stories of that happening back in Ohio. And she was getting worried. And all of a sudden, this angel shows up and gives her a jump start and, just saves her. So you get to experience, whether good or bad, how other people felt in reaction to what we do. And it's a learning experience. It's a learning experience in the importance of unconditional love for all people in all circumstances, especially, and from what I understand from near-death experiencers, the most important part of that element, that unconditional love that we have to have, is unconditional love for the people who our ego tells us they don't deserve it. They've really betrayed us or really done something horrible. And, they generally don't deserve that forgiveness or whatever. Unconditional love, for the most difficult to love people, that's the most meaningful to heaven when we manage to do that. So it's a hard step to take, but when we manage to do it, it usually results in a beautiful thing.
And those life reviews where they see how they hurt others, it's like an intervention, like they do with the drug addicts nowadays, where everybody comes in and says, this is how this affected me, and that's how it affected me. And when you think of the life review, and I was thinking about prisons, like, wonder why, because I used to be a counselor in prison, and we didn't do a lot with them, really, and so it just seems like it would be so nice if we could have the victim's family, people come in and say, sit down in front of them, or like we're doing now through a computer, but face to face, and this is how you hurt me, so they can see. Let them have their life review now. Let them see the harm they did. Bring healing for both sides. I think if they could see a tear on that face, for them and what they were put through, for both sides, maybe there'd be healing.
Oh, sure. It's a tremendous, tremendous learning experience, these life reviews, even just being in that unconditional love that's beyond description that I wish I could remember. So even that's supposed to be pretty amazing. And it changes people profoundly. People come back from their near-death experiences, and they often have a change in marital status. If they're married, they might get divorced because they come back completely different people. And if the marriage does continue, it continues in a completely different way. And there's often career changes. One man who was a billionaire after his near-death experience gave up all his ties to the financial industry and became a qualified counselor, qualified family counselor. Another man who was a policeman decided he didn't want to carry a gun anymore, and so he became a high school teacher. Depending on where you teach, it might still be a good idea to carry a gun, but he wanted to do something for people. One man who was involved in organized crime gave all that up and became a counselor for kids who got in trouble with the law. So it profoundly changes these people. They come back more altruistic, less materialistic. They are far less interested, whatever they were chasing before, whether, it was travel or, fancy cars or, collecting fine art, whatever they were chasing before, they generally tend to give it up, or it takes a back seat to making meaningful connections with other human beings, meaningful friendships, and serving humanity. So they come back with a servant's heart. And it's beautiful to see the changes that happen in these people. Even people like Howard Storm, he's sort of this tyrant and yelling at people, and he comes back the most gentle, loving, compassionate man you can imagine, right? So it is a transformative experience. Yes.
It makes me think of Daniel Brinkley, the movie about him, Saved by the Light. At the end of it, this lady comes up and said, "You sure like the women, don't you? And you sure like to drink, don't you?" He says, "Yes, ma'am, I do." And she says something like, "Well, when God was picking out saints, he's like digging the bottom of the barrel when he found you." He's like, "Yes, ma'am, he did." They don't pick the saints. They pick we're picked. Like if NDEers are picked, I don't know. It's like everyday people, It's not as, of all walks of life. It's not just, we're just going to send the preachers back, or we're just going to send back, highly intelligent people or believable people,
Yeah, that the people who have had near-death experiences include the ones I've talked with, every religion you can imagine, including atheists and agnostics and so forth. And at first, when I started studying near-death experiences, I got real mad at Christianity. Okay, because I got taught a lot of things that just turned out to not be true. And I was very angry at the church. And it took me a while to really come to grips with religion. Because if you talk to these guys who have been on to the other side of the veil, and some of them do ask about religion, some of them say, well, what's the correct religion, expecting to hear, Catholic or Methodist or Buddhist or something like that. The answer is always the same. Well, the best religion for you is the one that brings you closest to God, right? So the way they feel about religion on the other side of the veil is they understand that there's people like you or I who can connect to God just kind of going our own way. But there's some people who prefer the structure of religion to connect to God, and there's nothing wrong with that. So do you know who Cryon is, Lee Carroll?
Who?
Lee Carroll. Okay, so Lee Carroll channels an entity named Cryon, who's in charge of the magnetic grid of the planet, which affects consciousness. And he's quite an interesting guy. He's spoken at the United Nations 7 times. He was invited there, and he spoke as Cryon, as the trans channeler Cryon. And he was invited back 6 more times. So the 2 examples I like to use are from him that talk about religion. The first is God can be seen as a tree of life. And there is a beautiful, giant, massive, loving trunk with roots that spread out and connect all of humanity. And there are many different branches in this tree. And there's the branch of Catholicism and Judaism and Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism and even atheism or agnostics. You can branch out any way you want and still be part of the trunk and connected to the trunk. So heaven is not really invested in the dynamics of religious structure as we are, which was quite a shock to me. I always thought there would be one correct religion and the rest were all wrong. And they just don't feel that way about it. No religion gets everything right. No human being sees the entirety of God. We only see a partial glimpse. And so religions are different cultures honoring God different ways with their own religions. The second analogy that Cryon gives that I really like is, this is the way they feel about it. Imagine you're in a bitter divorce, and out of spite, your spouse who gains custody of the children decides to hide the children from you and take them far away, and you've lost contact with your young children. And it's devastating. And you look for years and years, and you finally give up in despair. You can't find your children. The spouse has just had them well hidden. And one day they call you. They say, it's us. We've been looking for you for a long time. Hey, we're in the neighborhood. We want to come and see you. Of course you're excited. Oh my gosh, my kids after all these years. So you go outside and wait, and there's a car coming down the street, and it's them. Now, let me ask you something. Do you care what color that car is? Do you care what kind of car it is? Do you care what condition the car is in? Does it bother you if the car is a broken down old car with all these problems, or if it's a perfect car and new and running it? You don't care. You're just glad your kids came to see you. Heaven doesn't care if you're in a religion that's got a lot of questionable doctrines and a lot of, I don't know if this is. God is just glad that you're coming to connect with them, and he welcomes people with open arms, no matter what religion they use to come and connect. And what I like to say is, religion to me, it's all about Captain Cook's brew, right? So in the 1700s, when ships made long voyages that lasted several years, they could lose half or 2/3 of their crew due to scurvy. So scurvy is something the sailors would get from a long-term lack of vitamin C. So they had, salt beef and things like that, but they didn't get fresh fruits and vegetables on these long voyages. And so they would die of scurvy because your body needs vitamin C. Well, Captain Cook had a brew that he served up to his crew. And in 1771, I think it was, he successfully circumnavigated the globe, which had been done before, but this was different. Not a single crew member died from scurvy because they were drinking Captain Cook's brew. It contained an odd mixture of ingredients: salt, sauerkraut, malt, soap, vinegar. One of the ingredients was lemon syrup, which is loaded with vitamin C. So the rest of the ingredients had little or no effect. And I like to say that all the world's religions, the vast majority of them, have the active ingredient. And the active ingredient in religion is the love of our Creator. And so many religions talk about the importance of brotherly love and forgiveness and charity and kindness and gentleness and compassion in the afterlife. And I think we have a lot more in common than what we have separate. I even was at a music festival years back, and I had just published my book, and a guy looked at it and says, "Well, what is that?" And I said, "Well, it's a book about anything." He goes, "Well, I don't believe in that. I'm an atheist." And I said, "Well, we have a lot in common." And he says, What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, you believe that we're human beings pretending there's a God. I'm just on the other side of that. I believe we're God pretending to be human beings. So we both agree there's a lot of pretending going on. So he kind of calmed down and said, yeah, okay, and I told him, well, I really respect you because there really is no physical hardcore evidence. It does take a leap of faith. So you want to be an atheist? That's fine. And he says, well, I don't believe in religion. And I said, well, I don't believe in atheism. I said, you believe in love? And he says, yeah. And I said, well, I believe you're seeing a part of God. Everybody sees a different part of God. The love you have in your heart, that's from God. That's from source. So well,
I have my youngest brother. He has atheist as his license plate. His license plate says atheist.
Wow, okay.
And it seems like not all, but some of the atheists I talk to are so closed, like they might as well be like very Christian, where they're so closed. It's just this way, that way, because they're just as closed because they don't want to hear a thing. They don't want to debate. They don't want to hear any argument. They don't want to discuss it. And I'm like, what are you afraid of?
Yeah, I never try and pitch my beliefs anymore, because whether you're trying to convince somebody to join your religion or adopt your set of spiritual beliefs, you might have some success. If somebody's interested or somebody asks, I'll tell them about it. I think the best thing to pitch is love, compassion, kindness. That is overwhelmingly accepted. And, if you're a very loving, kind, compassionate, peaceful person, people are going to ask you. I remember when I was a single man, about 6 years back, I was on a date, and she was getting very mad. This is LA traffic, so it's some of the worst traffic in the nation. And she goes, well, you're not honking. Why aren't you honking? I guess because it's not bothering me to wait. It's just, I'm just being patient. I'm not upset with these guys. They're frustrated. I understand. And she said, well, what's your secret? So I told her, she kind of bought into it, So if you pitch love, I think you'll gain more than you will if you pitch your ideas, your religion. So I think that if I'm arguing with anybody about religious or spiritual beliefs, I've lost the whole point, because true love doesn't challenge or criticize another person's belief. It encourages them to explore and pursue what they want to believe, and if they ask or they're interested in what you believe, well, then tell them, right? But then otherwise, just let them go their own way. And I don't think atheists or agnostics are in danger of hell. I don't believe the hellish NDEs. I've heard that I have no evidence that it's permanent. It's not a punishment. It's not permanent. It's a disconnect from source that some souls, for whatever reason, decide to do. And when they're ready, every soul comes home eventually. There's always a kid that says, you're not my mommy. He gets mad, eventually he's going to come back. Right.
My mom always says that she's not going to go to heaven and she's not going to go to hell. She's going to stay and haunt her kids and make their life miserable. She'll probably try.
Oh, lovely. So what shall we talk about? Do you want to go over kind of the environment of heaven or the typical experience, or is there anything
whatever you like
you want to? Okay, so why don't we just go briefly over what near-death experiences are like. So I think we touched on it before a little bit. Most people come out of their body. If they're at the scene of an accident, they'll often try talking to other people. Some won't realize that they're out of their body. Some see their own body and don't recognize it because they say, we're used to seeing ourselves in 2D, like on a camera screen or in a mirror. When they see themselves in 3D, they sometimes don't recognize themselves, but they'll try and talk to other people, and they, nobody can hear them or see them. And that's not because they're ghosts. So there's this big misconception, people ask near-death experiences, were you like a ghost? No, I was the opposite of a ghost. I was more real and more alive than I've ever been in my life.
See, I felt like a ghost, like during my drowning.
Yeah, drowning, exactly. They may be in a hospital at the scene of an accident, or maybe they've had a heart attack. They see themselves from above, and then they're revived and they go back into their body. So that's the most common. Others notice, or their attention is drawn to something behind them or off to the side, and they turn and look. They see a tiny pinpoint of light. They describe this pinpoint of light as being 10,000 times brighter than the sun, but not at all harmful to the eyes like it would be in this life. They are attracted to the light like a magnet. The ones, sometimes at this point, there's a voice that says, it's not your time, go back. Others arrive in the light, and they are surrounded in this light that carries a love that is beyond description. We touched on that before. There's a feeling of peace, of purposefulness, that whatever happens has a purpose to it. All these things that we think are coincidences, there are no coincidences. There's a purpose to everything. There's a feeling of safety. There's a feeling of connectedness, a feeling of familiarity. I've been here before. I'm remembering this. I'm coming home. Oh, yes, this is my true home. Yes, now I remember. So there's all these amazing feelings. Some are given a life review. Some are taken on tours of heaven. Some meet dead relatives. Some people meet their former pets. So yeah, your pet does go to heaven. Now, some people have a body, others are a ball of energy. You can take any form you want in the afterlife, but generally their pets are sort of this, sphere of energy like they are, but not always. Sometimes the pets appear as they did on Earth, and they can communicate with their pets. So one woman was taken on a tour of the universe, and she was shown the beginning of time when the universe was created. Some people ask questions, several thousand questions. Everything from, what's the meaning of life? Why is there evil in the world? Is there life on other planets? Every question. I'm going to ask, what's up with the mosquitoes? Why did you invent these flying syringes that make us itch? That doesn't make sense to me, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. So, some at that point are given a choice to go back. They're told that their work is done and that they can choose to go back or stay. Others are told, no, it's not your time. You have to go back. The ones that are given a choice, they're very crafty up there in heaven. People, when they're told they've got to go back, when you experience perfection, pure perfection, a love beyond description, a joy that, can make the toughest battle-hardened soldier cry, you don't want to come back here. I mean, even women with newborn children, they don't want to come back. They're like, my kids will be fine.
I'm the only one that I know of. I was told it was my time. The answer was no. I couldn't go back.
Oh, wow. Okay. So then they are often shown, if you go back, this will be the benefits that those around you will get, or this will be the benefit to humanity if you return. And at that point, of course, if I heard their testimony, they came back. So everyone that I heard, they all came back. And coming back can be quite difficult. You're weightless in heaven, so there's no time. You're completely weightless. If you were in a situation of pain, like in an accident or surgery gone wrong in the hospital or something like that, you're back to all the pain of your ailing body, because you're out of your body. You are feeling pain-free and quite young and energetic, right? And then you're back in this constrictive, old, heavy wooden, body. People say they don't like the feeling of gravity, very heavy. That can cause severe depression. Some people try and actually commit suicide. A couple of the 1,000+ testimonies I've heard tried committing suicide to have another near-death experience and then be strictly warned, you're not the one. You're not to decide when you die. That is not for you. And they're sent back.
My 5-year-old Johnny, when I come back, I was given knowledge that my family doesn't love me. And I was told God sends children here to be loved. That's why he sends them here. And so here I am standing there on the road, after my family, puts me down, runs up to the house, and I see the alternative. Why would I go up to the house? The family doesn't love me. I was just flying, having fun. And I felt like it was my right, my choice. And so at 5 years old, I had wisdom probably I shouldn't have, knowledge I shouldn't have, that I should have been shielded from. And I've had people say after NDE group, they said, oh, God wouldn't have told you that. He don't tell you things that would hurt you. And I'm like, was you there? I think God can do whatever he wants and give us and it ended up serving me well throughout my life, because I gained a sense of injustice. Like, that's not right. That's not right. This isn't fair. In that moment when I said, well, that's not right. And it's just never left me. And
Yeah,
other
when I was
people don't seem to
reading,
have that. Everybody has that.
yes, I've noticed that. When I was reading your book and reading about the horror of your childhood and all the horrible stuff that you went through, uh, the idea that came to me was what one near-death experiencer said. He was in his mid-30s when he died. He had a chronic medical condition from his youth, and he had been wheelchair bound for most of his life, and he had breathing problems. So I can't remember the condition, but it was this chronic, rare condition. And one night when he was having a particularly hard time breathing, he stopped breathing and had a near-death experience. And he got to heaven and he said to God, well, you know, I've been a good Christian all my life. I've been a good man with good morals. I never really, you know, did any of these evil things. I've, you know, been best to be kind and loving towards others. Why was I punished with this affliction? Why have I been made to suffer so much? And he said, oh, did you forget? You volunteered for this. So they took him back to this thing that looked like a classroom, for lack of a better description. I mean, it wasn't a classroom, but that's what we would call it if it was on Earth. And the instructor was up there saying, you know, there are two ways to learn lessons. One is slower over time, and the other is quicker through a more difficult life. And he wrote the name of the guy's affliction on the board and says, you know, this is a painful affliction, but you're going to learn a lot very fast. Does anybody want to volunteer for this? And he's watching himself there, and the guy's saying, oh, me, I'll volunteer. So after that, he said he saw that completely different. He stopped seeing himself as a victim and more saw himself as what he was, which was a more advanced soul. And when I was reading your book, that's what I got. It's like, this is, you know, Earth has mostly older souls because it's the most difficult planet in this galaxy to be in. I mean, it's a really difficult place. So if you're here, you're like one of the best. You're like the Green Beret or Navy SEALs. And then there's people who have very difficult lifetimes. They're like the top Navy SEALs, you know? So that's what I got. I thought this woman, she pre-birth planning, she took on this big challenge because she's an older, more advanced soul. And she wanted to take on this bigger challenge and this difficult environment. And that's what I felt when I was reading all that.
And like, you know,
so
that
that's my
wildflower.
suspicion.
I'm sorry. That last word.
So that's my suspicion.
You know, and like, you know, that wildflower memory I had for so long, I didn't know what to make of that. You know, I didn't tell anybody. But then after I wrote my book, you know, that's why I got the title, The Will of a Wildflower, because that just seemed to sum it all up, the reason. Because, you know, while I was looking at the wildflower after the drowning, and I was told that because I would have a long, hard road ahead of me, but because of it, I would have a strength inside of me that other girls would never know. And, you know, now that I'm 60 years old, you know, I just see that more all the time, that we do gain strength through the rough times. You know, like we were saying earlier on, if I would have had it so perfectly easy and catered to and showered with love, I wouldn't be the person I am today that would be sitting there holding my disabled sister's hand at the hospital. Because I have 4 siblings that have nothing to do with her. You know?
Yep, you were the one who learned the importance of compassion through a traumatic childhood. In my book, I have a story called The King's Son. So once there was a wealthy king. He was a very good king, treated his subjects well. He cared about his people. And he had a son. And this son was going to be king. And the son grew up in the royal palace and had servants to cater to his every wish and obey his every command. But the pampered lifestyle resulted in this child becoming an adolescent who was sort of spoiled and didn't have much compassion for his subjects of the kingdom and was sort of selfish and bossy. And he, because he grew up in the royal palace, that can happen, right? You have no challenges. You're this authority figure. He just didn't develop the things he needed. So when the king's second son was born, he realized his first son wasn't fit to be king. So he says, well, my second son's going to be king, but I'm not going to make the same mistake. So he takes his second son as a newborn child to a family of poor farmers. And he says, you are to raise this prince as if he is your own child. You're never to tell them that he is a prince. I will be back when he's 18. And of course, This young man grows up on this farm, working long, hard hours. Sometimes the family goes without money, and he gets in fights and arguments with his brothers and sisters, and but they have a lot of good connections too, and they cooperate. And sometimes when the situation is really bad and they go without food for a few days, the king sends his men in the night secretly and leaves food on the doorstep. And when that young man turned 18, the king came and said, you are actually my son and you are going to be a prince and so forth. And that young prince was a very good man, became a very benevolent king. He said thank you and please to his servants. He was grateful for every royal meal that he ate. He had compassion for the poor because he was one of them. And the 1987 movie Overboard, you ever see that?
Yes.
Yes, it describes that concept in the same way. So just like you, from this traumatic childhood and the lack of love, compassion, now you have that for your sister when she was in the hospital. It does. Difficult, challenging times change us for the better. They make us better, more compassionate people.
I don't know how many times on Facebook or other times people are mourning their father just died, their mother just died, and they're just so crushed. And I always say, you're so blessed. You were so lucky. I didn't grow up with a father like that. And they start realizing I'm blessed and not, why did this happen to me? This isn't fair. This isn't right. And they end up every time realizing, you're right. I was so lucky. I am so blessed. Not everybody has this. Because I grew up seeing those kids with their dad and their siblings, protecting them and doting on them. And they go in at night and have supper, and you're going to go in the house and nobody's going to be there again. And there's no food again. And your brothers, sisters could care if you live or die, this soon you die, all those things. And so you grow up seeing you're an outsider looking in all the time. And so I'm so
the story where you came
happy
home
to
one day
point
and they
out
were
to
going to
them.
poison.
Huh?
That story that you came home one day and they were going to poison Don, was it?
My stepdad, yeah.
Stepdad?
Yeah. They had the rat poison bag out, getting ready to put in the coffee. If I
I was
hadn't walked
reading
in,
that. I just thought, I can't imagine growing up like that. I mean, I didn't have a perfect family. We had our dysfunction, but it was a pretty good, safe, loving environment. And,
and I'm pretty sure that's
that
why
had
my
to be
sister,
rough.
right after that, wanted me to jump off the train bridge. I think she was afraid I'd tell on him.
Oh, yep, I remember
I
that.
think that's why she wanted me to jump.
Thank God you didn't. So you have a purpose. You're here now on YouTube, telling people the good message. So, all right. So what else can we talk about heaven? Let's talk about what I call the first level of heaven. So there really isn't levels. That's something human beings do. We kind of divide things up. How many steps are there to ascension? There's no such thing as a step to ascension. There really isn't anything such as heaven or hell either. They're just other dimensions that collective souls create with their collective consciousness. And there are infinite amounts, but we're going to talk about this place that a lot of people go to that I would call the first level of heaven. That's pretty common. So in this first level, it's kind of laid out like Earth. And it's to get people accustomed to this different environment. There are roads and of transparent gold, apparently, and houses and trees and parks and lakes and waterfalls and mountains and rivers.
I hear white columns a lot.
Yes, big white columns like Gothic columns. And there are big cathedrals that are far more beautiful than our best cathedrals. And it's kind of funny too, like some of the people have seen cathedrals, when they see the cathedrals, they say, oh, you copy our cathedrals, because they're buildings made of crystals that glow with their own light. Well, we don't have translucent crystals that glow with their own light. The closest thing we have is stained glass, right? And they say, oh, you kind of copy us. And they say, no, you guys, you humans at a subconscious level, what heaven looks, so you kind of try to make your churches look like our cathedrals. We're not copying, you're copying us. So yeah, I've heard giant trees described that tower far greater than our big redwoods and sequoias, and just beauty beyond description. One man said he was in a field of grass and flowers that was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Another man said he was brought to a park in heaven, and he said it was a very beautiful park. And I said, what, like Yosemite? And for those of you who don't know, Yosemite National Park out in California, it's considered one of the world's best national parks. People come from all over the world to see it. There's waterfalls and pastures and big mountains. And he says, beautiful as Yosemite. He says, well, maybe 100 times more beautiful than Yosemite. I mean, it's beyond imagination how beautiful this place is. Now, we have three primary colors, right? Red, blue, and yellow. And a mixture of those three colors make up all the colors that we see. So if you look at a TV up close with a magnifying glass, you can even see the little pixels of these three colors. Some use red, green, and yellow, I believe. But you mix these three primary colors, it's all the colors of the rainbow. In heaven, there are over 80 primary colors. So they see colors that they can't describe. They come back and they say, I saw all these amazing colors that don't exist here. Well, what colors? Well, I can't tell you. So hearing is expanded. You can hear all sorts of tones that you can't hear on earth, but it's generally not used for communication. So there is a type of mind-to-mind communication that's very fast, very efficient. You cannot have a misunderstanding with this kind of communication. That's impossible. And it's so fast, it's non-linear. So what I mean by that is I say an entire sentence, Bob and Fred went to play, golf yesterday. And I say this string of words, and then you get the meaning of it. It's just a chunk of information. So one little download that happens in a second on the other side of the veil, it could take us here on earth with words an hour or a day to explain it. So your ears aren't used for communication. They're used basically for hearing the beautiful music of heaven. And probably the best description of the music in heaven is from Don Piper's book, 90 Minutes in Heaven. He was a pastor who died in a car accident.
I love that movie.
And he really enjoyed the music. And I quoted the part where he talks about the music. I quoted that in my book. So if you buy or get my book downloaded or email me for it, you'll get to read that.
I love the scene in that movie where they show the people in heaven walking by, people he recognizes, and it's just a really good description.
Oh yeah, I didn't see the movie. I still have to see the movie.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and then of course we have no blind spots, so we see all around 360 degrees. Your thought process is enhanced. So you have a clarity of mind that we just don't have here on earth. As I get older, my memory is just not what it used to be. I mean, I can hide my own Easter eggs. I just hide them. You wait 24 hours. I don't know where they are. Right. So the only thing that gets older, that gets better with age, I tell people, is my sense of smell. I can smell when somebody's BSing like a mile away now.
Oh, you smell BS.
So there's also a heightened emotions. People report having an intensity of emotion that we just don't have here on earth. There is a freedom. So there's a weightlessness. So you can travel in heaven anywhere you want. There's no delay between thought and action. So I remember one man said he was looking at some flowers on the ground in heaven and wanted to pick them. And in the same moment he thought about picking them, he had already picked them and they were in his hands. So there's no delay between thought and action. There's no time. Everything happens in the eternal now. I've heard it described as being instantly aware of eternity, or the eternal unfolding of now, or the absence of time. They say it's wonderfully liberating to have no time. There's a sense of safety, that you are protected and loved forever. There's a sense of, when they say unconditional love, that means nothing that we do. So this was a big shocker to me, because I was taught in religion, well, you're either good or bad, and you have to, if you're bad, well, then you're going to be punished, because that's what we do with bad people. And if you're good, then you get rewarded. Well, these are human concepts, right? These are not the concepts of God. So no matter what you do, you're loved just as much, whatever you do, good or bad. And I hear this over and over again from near-death experiences. They say, I was loved just for who I am, just for being, part of this grand creation, being a part of God. So just as a drop of water in the ocean is part of the ocean, we are little perspectives of God seeing the whole. So at the same time, we are the whole of God, we're also the individual perspective. And people have a hard time explaining what that's like. I don't understand it. I'm just parroting what they try and describe. But there's that sense of being their own individual self, but at the same time being the whole of creation. Some people say, you ask a question and the answer immediately comes. Other people say they instantly knew everything and there were no questions.
This time I was there, I felt a guided intelligence running everything. Like I was being watched, and I would be told, don't go yet. If they find you soon, you might go back. And I was told this. And then, even in the white light 20 years later, in that heaven scenario, there was definitely people I was answering to, depended on their mercy, their guidance, and, was taken here, was shown this. It wasn't me free to do as I please, at least at that point. Maybe after the entrance, and, you go on, it's all different. None of us know. But there was definitely a supervisor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the way I understand it, it's a collective consciousness that makes decisions together. So this planet, from what I understand, is a test of energy. It's a test of free will. So it's the only free will planet in this galaxy, which is why there's so much chaos and confusion and darkness. And I always looked at all of that as something negative. Mankind's going to destroy themselves. They're never going to make it, right? It was quite a shock to me that people asked about the future, were shown the future of Earth. And apparently what's happening right now is what they would call in the New Age spirituality community as the Great Awakening. So human beings are waking up spiritually. They're realizing there's more to life than just what their five senses tell them. The children that are being born today are different. I mean, if you look at the way they behave, they're acting with an emotional and spiritual maturity that didn't exist when you and I were kids, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this great awakening happening, and everything seems chaotic right now. And I mean, it seems like, the world is going to hell, but it's the exact opposite. We're actually playing out a wonderfully beautiful success story. So every planet in the galaxy takes one of two paths. This is what I understand from the other side of the veil. They either destroy themselves through a combination of war and environmental disaster, or they learn to live with each other and with nature in peace and harmony. And we have had a paradigm on Earth for a long time. For as long as recorded history can remember, there's been a paradigm of competition and violence and war. If I want something, I'm going to have to take it by force. Yeah. Well, there's a new paradigm, and that new paradigm is there is enough for everybody. We do not need to compete and fight the way we used to with our technology, with our ability to manufacture, with our computers, with the internet, and with everything we know. We can provide everything that everybody needs. And it's just a matter of us changing our social, cultural, government systems. So all the old institutions that served us so well for so long are crumbling. I mean, if you look at politics, have you ever seen politics so divided? I never have in my lifetime. In my 56 years, I've never seen such division in politics. Well,
it feels to me like there's like one world order taking over the whole world.
Yes, that was the plan. Well, Earth is on the latter path. We came very close to destroying ourselves. We had the weapons. The United States and Russia had, thousands of nuclear weapons pointed. We were ready to do it. And that was where we were headed. That's what Revelation predicted. But thanks to a lot of help from above, that's not going to happen now. The game is over. The race has been won. It's just a matter of this plan playing itself out, and humanity is going to become an ascended species, and we're going to be living with each other in peace and harmony. And it's not going to be heaven, but compared to the way today, right. It'll be like heaven on earth. And this is going to happen fairly quickly in about 150 years. So there's going to be a lot of change. And it's just like, if I want to get to town, that's 10 miles away where I live. Well, I can walk there, and that, it's a long walk, but it'll be pretty easy. Or I can run and get there a lot faster, and it's going to be uncomfortable, right? So the faster you make changes, the more uncomfortable it is. We're going through some very fast changes. And the way I like to talk about it is like this. If your house that your family lived in for generations and generations is falling apart, the wood is rotten, the electrical is faulty, the plumbing is leaking, the roof is no good anymore, and you just can't patch it up anymore, and you got to bulldoze it and make way for a new house. When you're standing there with your family looking at it, the day the bulldozers come and knock it over, it seems like the end of the world. And we have a lot of that going on right now. We had riots in the streets. I mean, all over the world right now, there's protests in the streets and there's violence, and it seems like everything's falling apart. But really what we're doing is we're making way for a kinder, gentler version of humanity. And so it's coming. The world
Who
of
is though?
love is
Who
coming.
is?
It is coming here.
Who is though? Who is creating this better world?
Who is doing it?
Yeah.
Well, we are. It's generally the light workers that are
Because
leading.
the people are like, this is bullcrap. So, and we feel like we are being dominated by this one world order, or whatever it's called. People feel they're losing their rights, and they're being censored. And
yeah. So what's happening with that? So there was, this is all stuff that people think it's, I always consider it conspiracy theory stuff, right? Oh yeah, there's an Illuminati or a group of powerful and they're controlling everything. You're crazy. That's nice to say. Well, apparently the information from the other side of the veil is that most conspiracies are true, So yeah, there's a group of powerful family that kind of runs the world. It is to me now, right? That kind of runs the world. And they had a very specific plan. And they talk about it, I think, on the Georgia Guidestones. So there's these stones in Georgia that list their goals, and they talk about it very plainly. They want to reduce the world's population to about 500 million. Georgia, yeah.
Guidestone.
I think they're called the Georgia Guidestones. And they want to reduce the world population to about 500 million. And they want to have basically a sort of a slave worker class. And they consider themselves the brilliant people, like the pharaohs of old, destined to rule because they're smarter than everybody else. Well, what's happening is people are waking up. They want a better world with, peace and kindness and protection and no more wars. And they're losing control, and they're being exposed. And it's just like when I was a kid and I knocked down this giant wasp nest with a stick. It was over. Okay. I destroyed their home. They're done. But they were angry. They were not going down without a fight. And man, did they come after me. And that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing I don't like to call them global elite because there's nothing elite about them. I call them the money mafia. The money mafia is getting more and more desperate. And the more desperate they get, the more obvious it gets. And the more they're exposing themselves for the evil they are, and the faster their downfall is going to be. So they can't see what they're doing because fear is this bubble, and it can blind you. And the example I like to use is Kim Jong-un. And when he took control of North Korea from his father, he had an ego the size of a football field, and he wanted that ego stroked. That's what he was all about, being loved, being praised. So what did he do? He tightened the screws even more. He killed some people that he thought might be his enemies and tightened the screws even more. And he couldn't see a better solution. He couldn't see something that would have stroked his ego 100 times better. He could have walked in for the rest of his life, walked into the United Nations and gotten a standing ovation, his face on the cover of every newspaper and magazine being praised by the world. He would have had the most amazing life if he would have just thought of reunifying North and South Korea. But he couldn't see it. Fear. He could only see his own little bubble. And that's what's happening with global elite right now. So it's going to take some time, and things are probably going to get worse before it gets better.
Oh, I know they are.
Right now is to not fear the changes. I'm sorry, what?
I know they are. I've heard the talk.
Yeah. So the most important thing for us is to not fear the changes, to not fear everything that's going on. The news, I tell people, don't watch the news. The news is a well-crafted fear report. I mean, go to Google News or some news source and count how many negative articles there are. It's about 85% negative. It'll usually
it seems they're trying to make the other side hate. Keep half the country hate this, the other half hate them. Hate, trouble. Both sides.
They got to keep us divided. Yeah. So they're doing their best, and it's falling apart. But I say the best thing to do, and this is what I got from near-death experiences, actually, turn the news off, turn the TV off, go out for a walk in nature with a good friend, leave the cell phone at home, pay attention to your own world and the people around you, the people that you interact with. You don't need to know. Human beings were not meant to take on the misery and chaos and suffering of an entire planet by watching the darn news. We weren't meant to do that emotionally. So I like to say, just pay attention to your own little world. Be the person who's calm and kind and compassionate when everybody else is acting crazy, because the light workers, the ones who are sort of leading this transformation of humanity, they're people like you. It's only going to take less than 1%, about 0.5%. There's no fixed number, but there's a point where the energy tips. And once a certain number of people sort of have this vision of a different world, the rest kind of jump on board. So it's only a matter of time before that happens. So, stay calm, keep the faith, stay positive, be kind and compassionate in all circumstances, especially when people are acting out and being crazy. And that's when we need the kindness and compassion the most, when people are really freaking out in fear mode. That's when they need that calmness.
I think that would be a good message to leave on.
Yeah,
that's a good message.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the invite, and I enjoyed being on your show. Hope to come on again sometime.
Fun. Very informative. Thank you. Thank you so much.